Hi, good evening. I'd like to call to order the regular meeting of the Boulder Valley Board of Education meeting for Tuesday, April 22nd. Sandy, will you please call the roll?
Albright.
Here.
Belleville. Here. Benford. Here. Fuqua. Here. Marquis. Here. Myers. Here. Reed.
Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. We apologize for being a little bit late getting started this evening. I had a little trouble getting my computer up, and we had a meeting that ran over a little bit late, but thank you for your patience and for being here tonight. I'd like to read the mission of the Boulder Valley School District to keep in mind while we're here. The mission of the Boulder Valley School District is to create challenging, meaningful, and engaging learning opportunities so that all children thrive and are prepared for successful, civically engaged lives. And the first item on our agenda today, this evening, is our superintendent's report. Dr. Messenger.
Good evening, President Albright, members of the board. It's great to have you here, and looking forward to a productive evening. A few things going on in the school district I just want to mention, and at the end I'd be glad to answer comments about these items or comment on others. So we are in process of administering the Colorado Measure of Academic Success, the CMAS test. This is the first wave of new assessments that are being administered across the state of Colorado. So we have social studies and science tests for our students grades 4 through 8th, alternating social studies in 4th, science in 5th, social studies in 7th, and science in 8th. These are our online assessments, so we've gone through several opportunities of getting the hardware set, software downloaded, cached, and ready to administer. So hasn't gone without some challenges, but we're learning from the experience, and so we are going to collect feedback from our principals and teachers within our system so we can inform ourselves about that, and it's helpful. We'll bring a report to you on that and certainly share it with the Colorado Department of Education. This is the first time this assessment has been administered statewide. We did participate in the pilot of this assessment just a year ago, so we had some introduction to it at that time. So that's kind of a new big issue we're working through right now. The other thing I want to just mention, thanks to all of you for attending some combination of the community values meetings for the capital improvement planning process. We made our way from Nederland to Lafayette and places in between and finished up last Thursday with an all-Spanish version presentation. Tina, thank you for being there. We were up at Arapahoe Ridge. We had a nice turnout, good conversation. So all of those notes are being pulled together. Tomorrow evening, SIPSE, the big committee, continues their work, and what they're working towards is to, by May 20th in a work session, be sharing with you those prioritized needs that have come from their year-long plus work, the input we've gotten from lots of sources, and so we look forward to bringing that package forward to you in about a month. So SIPSE continues their good work. I sent an email to you a while back regarding Title I funding. Our annual receipt of Title I funding is around $2 million a year. We presently have 7 schools that benefit from those resources because they're our highest poverty elementary schools, over 40% free and reduced count in those schools. This 10% reduction, as I mentioned to you before, appears to be the result of a county census that then they look school district by school district of the level of poverty within our area. And it isn't a census we participate in, it isn't one we administer, but it's their data collection, and it's done across our state, across the country. So most, overall, Colorado was up in poverty. We were down some. Overall, the level of funding going to districts was up some. We were down. And so we are now at the level of pursuing this to the U.S. Department of Education. We mostly want to make sure that the data is accurate. I mean, if it is our new reality, then we'll adjust and figure that out. We are proceeding as if that's what it's going to be, but we will continue to see what recourse we might have for appealing this decision, or at least getting a reprieve until the next census is done. So we're getting kind of an education on how this works. It's a bit out of our area of responsibility, how that data goes in that determines that distribution of resources, not just to our school district, but school districts throughout the country. So I'll keep you informed on that. I just want you to know we're continuing to work on that. last Friday morning, I had the opportunity to attend a presentation on the CU campus. Was invited to hear comments by the NASA Administrator Charles Bolden. First time he'd been to, well, not the first time he'd been to Boulder. He came to Scott Carpenter's funeral in the fall, but first time he'd been on the CU campus to see the work they're doing around aerospace. It was an enjoyable presentation. He was an intelligent, engaging individual, and it was really fun to be a part of that group. A lot of university faculty who were involved in space planning and exploration were in attendance. So anyway, I went there as a member of the Boulder Economic Council. On Monday of this week, Lori and Albright and Dr. Deirdre Pilch and I attended the, I guess it's quarterly, about every 3 or 4 months we come together with CU, the Boulder Valley School District, the city and county, and leadership in those organizations, and have a good lunch together and good conversation, and we did that yesterday, and it was another productive session. And I'll just give a quick update because we don't have a legislative update on our agenda this evening, is that probably what we're continuing to work most closely with is around House Bill 1292. That's the school funding, the Student Success Act. That would be the additional funding that would come to school districts. That's in addition to what the governor's proposed budget is. So right now, changed a little bit this afternoon a couple times, but appears to be around $110 million of ongoing money that would, quote, buy down the negative factor. That's what we've been planning on. That's what you'll see later this evening in the budget. The $30 million or so in English Language Learner Program dollars seems to still be intact. The $20 million seems to be intact for the READ Act. Those are numbers that we have planned as a part of our budget planning process. So no changes there that we're aware of as we make our way through the process. It was in Senate Finance, go through appropriations, and then to the full Senate probably later this week. So it appears we're getting close to the end. One aspect of this bill that was removed was the average daily membership counting. We had a lot of input on that, as did other school districts, and it was pulled from the bill earlier this session, which we appreciated. We thought it was not ready for prime time, and so a study will occur, and we'll participate in that study. The other aspect of this bill around transparency, increasing transparency of how and where we spend our resources, in addition to the transparency requirements we presently have. We had some concerns about how that was in the original or amended bill, about the burden that would place on school districts to collect and report that data, additional costs for the Colorado Department of Education, several $1 million a year to capture that data, put it on a statewide portal so folks could go in and look school by school how every dollar is spent. So we thought it was maybe a little over the top as far as the need for transparency. I mean, not that there wouldn't be value in having information out there, but the burden and the cost was a concern. There was no money coming to schools to assume that burden of responsibility, of course. So we've worked on an amendment. I'm not sure that amendment's going to make it to the finish line. Bill Sutter, our Executive Director for Budget, has been pretty involved in this, and others have given comment from our district. So at the end of the day, we're not quite sure today where we're going to be with this transparency. There will be an increased expectation. We're just not sure to what level it'll be. That's an amendment they're still working on in committee right now. So that's mostly what we're watching. Some other bills and giving some input as they're throwing a few in right here at the end that we have thoughts on. So anyway, that'll end my report, Lori, and I'd be glad to answer any questions.
Thank you. Are there any questions, comments?
Yeah.
Thank you. Jenny?
I would like to comment on some of the legislative stuff. First of all, although she's not a member of our delegation, I think that, I have to turn this on, thank you. I think that we all, people should owe a big debt of gratitude to Senator Nancy Todd, who represents Cherry Creek and Aurora, and who has been the victim of some sort of unprecedented legal or legislative shenanigans at the Senate Education Committee. She worked very hard to introduce an amendment to the transparency bill that we could live with, that still required transparency but was more palatable in terms of gathering and reporting information for us. And she also worked hard to get more money into the buy down of the negative factor with fewer strings involved, and she got those amendments through her committee, and then in an unprecedented sort of lack of, or an unprecedented maneuver, the bill was then referred to the Senate Finance Committee, of which Michael Johnson, who's the sponsor of 1292, was the chair, and at the last moment they signed Jesse Olaberry, who's a member of that committee, on as a co-sponsor of 1292, making it very clear that they were just going to go ahead and strip out the amendments that Senator Todd and some other of our legislators, including Senator Vicki Marble, worked on. And I think that level of, I'm not a big fan of how that was handled. I think that's, so what more can I say about that? Let me see, there was some other comment I had about that. I think that's it. I have some comments about the CMAS, but I will save them for my own comments.
Any other questions for Dr. Messenger? Okay, great, thanks. The next item on our agenda is public participation and public hearing. The board and tonight we have 2 people who've signed up, but only one will speak. But I'll first read our guidelines. The board recognizes the value of public comment on issues related to the operations of the schools. To ensure that our meeting is conducted in an orderly manner, we ask that persons who address the board, number 1, confine your comments to matters that are germane to the business of the school district. Speakers on agenda items will be heard first, followed by those speaking on non-agenda items. Limit your presentation to 2 minutes. If we go over the first hour, we'll finish up at the end. 3, recognize that students often attend or view our meetings. Speakers' remarks, therefore, should be suitable for an audience that includes kindergarten through 12th grade students. The board president may interrupt, warn, or terminate a participant's statement that is unrelated to the business of the district or inappropriate for K-12 students. There's a lighting system on the podium. It'll start this evening with 4 minutes. It will be green. It will turn yellow when there are 30 seconds remaining, and it will turn red at the end of the 4 minutes. And when the light turns red, please wrap up your comments so the board can proceed with the rest of the agenda. So tonight, we have 2 people who've signed up, Michelle Crawford and Danny Rudkin. Is that correct? Great. And one of you will be speaking? That's right. Great. Please come, and here's our podium, and thank you for being here.
Good evening, President Albright and school board members. My name is Michelle Crawford. I'm a parent of a Monarch freshman who is currently a member of the Monarch mountain bike team. My son, along with 8 other Monarch students, some of which are here this evening, represented their school in the National Interscholastic Cycling Association competition, or NICA, in Colorado during the fall of 2013. Last year, prior to regaining our club status, we included a student from Centaurus High School, who was a wonderful addition to our team. Centaurus does not offer mountain biking as an intramural sport. The Monarch mountain bike team has regained club status for 2014-15 season. As part of that status, administrative policy has said that students from other Boulder Valley high schools may not participate on the Monarch mountain bike team this coming season. We would like that decision reversed. If you are unfamiliar with mountain biking as an intramural high school sport, NICA is an organization that not only regulates the sport at the high school level, but is now bringing the program to the middle school level in order to increase awareness nationwide for the high school sport. NICA regulates high school mountain bike competitions throughout the state, much like other athletic organizations do for snow skiing, ultimate frisbee, and other club and intramural sports. Currently in Boulder Valley, there are 3 teams. Boulder and Fairview High Schools have anywhere from 25 to 60 members on their mountain bike team this year and will next year. Monarch is a small team by comparison. Monarch would like to include interested students from Centaurus and Peak to Peak High School and other Boulder Valley East Side high schools that do not offer mountain biking as a club sport. Currently, we have 4 students that are in the Boulder Valley East Side that would like to join Monarch's team next year. We think those numbers might grow. In the state of Colorado, there are a number of combined high school teams competing at NICA races, Vail Valley and Grand Valley, just to name a few, 2, I should say. These teams are called Composite Teams, allowing students from multiple high schools to be on one team, yet ride under the umbrella of one school. With your approval, Monarch's team would become a composite team for the east side of Boulder Valley, while recognizing each individual school participating on that team. The current Colorado High School Activities Association, or CHASA as we know it, refers to the Colorado State statute in their handbook regarding the participation of students in extracurricular and interscholastic activities. The state statute is clear. If a student's school of attendance does not offer an activity in which the student wishes to participate, the student may participate in the activity at another public school, in the student's school district of attendance, or in the student's school district of residence. If there is concern from administrative staff or this board regarding the overuse of Monarch's resources to support such a team, it's important to note that that mountain biking is a unique sport, and school facilities cannot be used for practice or competition. With the exception of some help we have had from the school treasurer to manage funds for the team and a few school announcements made during the season, everything else is done off-site. Public trails in Boulder County are used, and NICA-designed courses are used throughout the season for competition. Equipment and transportation for practice and competitions are the sole responsibility of the participants. Coaches are volunteers. Boulder Valley is a mecca for cycling and a destination for many mountain bikers. Students at Monarch are lucky to have this sport offered at their school, and we thank you for that opportunity. We ask that the same opportunity be afforded to the other Eastside Boulder Valley high schools like Centaurus and Peak to Peak that want to participate but do not have the club sport offered at their schools, and let them ride on a new Monarch composite team for the 2014-15 school year. Thank you. I can take any questions if you are unfamiliar.
Thank you. We actually don't have questions that we would ask, but you're welcome to wait, and there may be comments. Some board members may respond to what you've just told
Presented.
us about.
Thank you.
So thank you very much for coming, and thank you for bringing the students with you.
Yeah.
Thank you for being here. We're always glad to see students in the room. Thanks. Okay. The next item on our agenda is board communication. Board members, do you have any comments or updates, thoughts? Jim?
I'll go ahead. No, I think this is just going to be addressed to Dr. Messenger. Kind of a follow-up to the additional club. We had a different speaker last time come out about club issues and participation. We've got an entirely different subject tonight, but still the same thing. You were going to get us a memo on kind of what the philosophies were.
So you'll receive a memo tomorrow with response to the chess club. So we finally got all the information on the history of this and the number of conversations we had with the individual who spoke to you and the responses, so you'll have a full overview. And this is a very different issue, and we'll follow up on this one as well.
Okay, thank you.
Well, I didn't hear the last part you said. This is a very different issue, the issue we just heard about.
So we'll follow up on this.
Follow up on that. Great, okay. Thank you. Thank you. Sam?
Congratulations on going to nationals, and we appreciate you coming here tonight, and I look forward to the follow-up. Seems like something I hope we can work out.
Jenny?
Well, yes, thanks for coming out tonight. We can't really take questions, sorry about that. We do look forward, I also look forward to the follow-up. And no, actually, somebody else talked to me about wishing their child would ride on the Monarch mountain bike team. So it's an issue that's come up in Broomfield as well sometimes. So I'd like to comment about I visited Cold Creek this afternoon. I'm going to comment about it in particular. It's a great school, so if you happen, which comes as no surprise, and I really enjoyed my visit. But one of the things that concerned me is sort of a follow-up on the CMAS administration, and it's not anything that I expect you to do anything about, Bruce, because I realize this is totally beyond our control, but it makes me really glad that we're pursuing the conversation at the state level about the amount of testing we're doing, because what I saw deeply concerned me, and it had nothing, the staff was doing a wonderful job, but what I heard was that the children of Cold Creek had been testing pretty much continuously since February. And that deeply concerns me because it means that other things are not happening. And what I also saw in terms of setup was it's not that easy, even with fifth graders, to get that many fifth graders all set up on a machine. So what I saw was four adults in the room, working with kids to get them all signed up, which I suppose in future years that may be an easier thing to do and everybody may get used to it, but it doesn't strike me as a terrifically sustainable model for administering tests. And the other thing I heard was that next year when, the other thing I heard was that it takes the support of all of their special teachers, so that means that next year, as we move to those tests, we won't be able to offer art or music or PE because our teachers will be helping give the CMAS. And I think, especially in our community that values those kinds of things, and even if community aside, those things are important for our children. That's why we offer them, and that's why our community values them. That's really a shame. And the other thing that really concerned me was the level of stress in the building. I just really wish that it goes to the high stakes nature of the test and the sort of what I feel is a punitive attitude of the legislature as they implement reforms in our state. I think that that's a shame, because I think that while schools should always be improving, and we should, in an ideal world, we would be working with the legislature. They would consult us about what kinds of things would be helpful, and because our school administrators and teachers and staff are, after all, the experts, and they wouldn't attempt to implement these sort of punitive kinds of reforms. And I just think that's a real shame. And I was actually way angry about it earlier in the day, but I've calmed down a little bit. So that's just that's just a conversation that I hope that we will continue to have with our legislators as time goes forward, because it's partly about the funding, and a lot of these things would be a lot easier if we had the resources to carry them out, but it's also about partnerships between levels of government, and I just think we could do better as a state, and I wish we would. So, and I'd also like to give a shout out to the Boulder stake of the Church of the Latter-day Saints, who had a really nice event last week where they honor Boulder Valley teachers, or actually the students who are part of that stake, nominate teachers and award and recognize them for their contributions. And so it's a great student-run event. I just love it. I love the way that those students are spotlighted, and I also love the way that our teachers are spotlighted. And then, just as a comment, one of the teachers said to me afterwards, she did say she was honored, but she said it was such a great learning event because she could hear what the student had to say about her and use that to improve her practice. And I thought, yes, our teachers just rock. And so I was really proud to be part of Boulder Valley on a whole number of levels. And that's all.
Great. Anyone else? Shelley?
I met with Tim Plass from the City Council last week, and we had a fairly broad-ranging discussion, but much of it was about how we could work together more closely on mutually beneficial projects. And we talked about field improvements, transportation issues, and meeting space. Since we're in need of that, and they're in need of that, and they're actually planning on building some additional space. And he talked to me about how maybe we could work together if we need that space and use that space as well. So they were just very general conversations, but what did come up, and I think we've mentioned this in the past, is that they have a school issues committee, the City Council does. And if we want to work with them more closely, it would be nice if we had volunteers from our board that would meet with them. And so we decided that that might be the next step for us if we want to work more closely together, is to have a few people volunteer if they'd like to be on that, and I'd be happy to do that. Maybe 2 or 3 people, and then set up a meeting with them to talk about how to prioritize some of those things. So I just throw that out. I don't know if you want to maybe send out an email about getting volunteers or discuss it. I'm not sure how that would go, but.
Yeah, well, and historically, that's something we've had before, of people who have talked about the city of Boulder and BBSD issues. And so, it makes sense to pursue it from my point of view. Let's think about the best way to do that. I can certainly send out an email to see if there's interest in this, or we could even talk about it at agenda setting. But take volunteers. I don't want to make assignments, although we could. But yeah, thanks. Good. And anything else? Okay, Tina? No? Anyone? Tom? Anybody? Well, I would just say I attended the Senate Education hearing on last Thursday, and it was pretty discouraging to hear some of the comments about the funding and about what I would call sort of the micromanaging of school districts with people who haven't really been in our shoes or our staff shoes to be having great ideas about what we should be doing. It's difficult for me to think about how a legislature could be making plans or decisions that affect every single school district, every single child in our state without really knowing exactly how it works. But it was eye-opening, and I was very glad to see there were several superintendents who testified along the lines, Bruce, of what you were talking about, some of those concerns, the transparency and the counting of children, et cetera. And they were very articulate, and I was really pleased with the whole effort of staff, parents, school board members, and others who care about public education to talk about what the issues are. And I think, I'm hopeful at this point that, we'll get what we have asked for here, which is funding without a lot of strings attached, and let us make the best decision for Boulder Valley. So, anyway, that was my activity for the week. The next item on our agenda is an action item. They're consent grouping, and I'll read them now. Personnel items is attached. Approval of minutes, April 8th. Approval of minutes, April 11th. Approval of minutes, April 15th. Cash management for the 2013-14 fiscal year. Non-renewal of contracts. Grant agreement between the State of Colorado Department of Public Safety, Division of Homeland Security, and Emergency Management in Boulder Valley School District. A grant watched over by the Deputy Superintendent of Expelled and At-Risk Students. A grant from the Colorado Department of Education. A grant University Hill Elementary School Play Yard with funds from Great Outdoor Colorado, or GOCO. Do I have a motion to approve? Jenny, second. Sam? Are there any, would anyone like to pull any of these items? Would anyone like to comment on any of these items? Tom?
Yeah, I have a question on the non-renewal of contracts. I counted 94 on there. Is that typical, or are there other circumstances going on there?
So I think it's fairly typical. I mean, what impacts this probably the most are just the number of limited term contracts, probably the percentage of the whole. It also depends a little bit on the number of new employees we've had over the last 3 years because they're in that non-probationary status. So I would think it's in the ballpark, Tom. I think, again, I have not done further analysis, but it's certainly within plus or minus 10 of what we would normally have. So,
Thanks.
Other questions? Sandy, will you please call for the vote?
Albright?
Yes?
Belleville?
Yes.
Benford? Fuqua?
Yes.
Marquis? Myers?
Yes.
Reed?
Yes.
Motion passes.
The next item on our agenda is a study item. It's the preliminary budget update. So Bruce, would you like to give us a little context here?
Sure, I'd be glad to. Thank you, President Albright. So a week ago tonight, we had the opportunity to have a work session, and we presented our initial view of what we are looking at with the preliminary budget, which included projected revenue, again, still waiting and watching what the legislature accomplishes in their final days, but we think we're pretty confident on our projections there. Our student enrollment growth was included in that calculation, and then we took time to walk through the anticipated expenditure side of the budget and some recommendations on how some of those funds may be used and utilized, and we had that conversation a week ago. So what Bill Sutter, our Executive Director for Budget Services, is prepared to share with you this evening. We have attached to your agenda a PowerPoint presentation. I think we also sent that to you via email in advance. Just a few slides that really capture what was on the worksheet that we walked through last week. So what we'd like to do is fairly quickly, I suppose, go back through those slides and to give you kind of reset the context for this, and then we would obviously be glad to entertain any questions or discussion among members of the board. So with that, I'll turn it over to Bill Sutter. Bill?
Thank you.
So we are at the point in our budget development process of bringing the preliminary budget back to the board. So as Dr. Messenger said, we did look at this at the work session last week. So bring up this PowerPoint real quick. Let's see. Slideshow. Magic. There we go.
There we go.
So again, in the attachments to the agenda item, this is just a summary of the page that walks through the more detailed revenues and expenditures for the general operating fund. So we are projecting a student count increase budget to budget. So this is a little bit different than actual to budget on the student count. 255 FTE, or just under 0.9% growth. We've also built in the 2.8% Denver Boulder Greeley Consumer Price Index inflation rate to the base funding. It's $196 per student. So for new revenue related to that inflation growth and our 25% mill levy override, just under $10 million. We do have unallocated resources in the current year that will carry forward into the next year. We have increased transfers to charter schools because they get their portion of inflation and growth and override funds. Other funds and reserves, as our total resources grow, so do the requirements on our reserves. We have compensation built in, holding place for health insurance, a cost of living adjustment, movement on schedules, and the statutory increase in the PERA. So that leaves a balance, deficit balance at this point of $1.8 million ongoing available. Bringing that forward, we have new revenue that is expected, additional revenue that is expected through the legislative impacts both in the School Finance Act as well as the Student Success Act. That's an additional $181 per student. Built into that are also the legislative impacts related to those funds. There are some requirements for spending some of those dollars, as well as transfers to charter schools, and then some fees, contracts, and service items. We have built in a $1 million staffing reserve to deal with staffing anomalies and student shifts into the fall. And we have shifted our literacy programming onto ongoing dollars from one-time dollars from the last couple of years. So we currently have a positive projected balance in the general operating fund of about $400,000. In addition, we are carrying forward funding for the transportation fund with one-time dollars. We did have a budgeted ending balance in this current fiscal year that will be used next year to additionally fund the transportation. There is current work undergoing to possibly see some more savings related to that, and we'll know more about that as we move forward in the spring. That's it for the slideshow. All other funds are either balanced with a zero balance or have a positive balance at this point as well. So that's it.
Thank you, Mr. Sutter. So Lori, I think Bill, Leslie, myself, we'd be glad to try to answer questions, add additional clarity, or hear your comments.
Okay, great. Thank you, Bill. Are there questions? Tina?
Does this budget include the decrease in Title I funding already?
So it's reflected in the grant fund, yes.
Okay.
So I might just add, if I could, Lori, to
Please.
that comment. So it's a federal fund, so it's in the other funds. And so the other work we've been doing under Sandy Ripplinger, Assistant Superintendent for School Leadership's work, we've been working with those schools directly impacted by that reduction through our staffing appeals process. Because again, we don't anticipate a response, even if we're successful. We don't anticipate we would know that till fall. So we need to have a plan going into the school year. So we're working on that assumption. So even though that doesn't reflect in the Title I budget that's in your packet, it is a part of our planning process.
I'm assuming it would be well covered in the 1 million in reserve for staffing, or
So
would
we've
you be
actually
looking-
addressed it before that.
Okay.
And the other piece, there was some carryover funds in Title I and some reallocation of big funds within the $2 million grant that created some flexibility given how quickly this came upon us in our planning. So we did some internal adjustment with the utilization of existing this year and next year's Title I funds to help accommodate, at least ease that transition if that's our new reality.
Shelley?
I know we're fairly confident that we're going to get this Student Success Act funding, but do we have a budget that doesn't include it, just in case? Or is that not something we're even contemplating at this point?
Perish the thought.
No, to answer your question directly, no. We don't have an alternative budget under that assumption. Obviously, we know the impact it would have if only a portion of it occurred, and there's still flexibility, obviously, on numerous fronts. And so, we'd have to revisit some of those. Our staffing allocations have occurred, so we don't, well, I'm not going to say that. We could rescind all those and start again. It would just be pretty disruptive. So, that's, as we walk through the process in the spring and March before spring break, we do the staffing allocations. That's kind of a big decision, and then we walk through this. So, but I would say we're highly confident, Shelley, that this will represent our budget. I also would say we don't really anticipate additional money either. We think this is pretty accurate. So it seems that on 1292, House Bill 1292, the work they're doing really is sort of on the fringe of some of this. This READ Act, $20 million for READ Act was some of what got caught up in this hearing that Jenny was describing and Lori did last week as well. So that could have looked a little different for us. The reality is if they would have put it into the negative factor or left it in the READ Act, our takeaway would have been about the same either way. We've run both sets of numbers. So really this, we're pretty close, we think.
Other board members? Questions or comments? Jenny?
So this is not really a question, it's just a comment on the state of ongoing funding from the legislature. I'm actually not in a very good place about school funding this week. And part of it is because it seems to me like one of our guiding principles as a board has been to look for efficiencies. And as I visit schools and as we talk as a district about places, different programs we have, it seems to me like when we dig down under the surface, what we find is not places where we could exercise more efficiencies, but programs that are held together with duct tape and rubber bands. And that we are really, even in a district where we are so much better off than many of our neighboring districts, we are operating so close to the bone that we can't do the things for students that we need to do. And so I'd like to congratulate our staff on putting together a budget that will work for next year, but I think we should all keep in mind that we could do so much better for our kids if we just exercise the political will as a state.
Yeah. Thank you. Shelley?
Which reminds me, Jenny, that I think now would be a good time to acknowledge Bruce and his staff for the fact that we do have this extra $3.5 million in our budget, or whatever it's going to turn out to be. I'm not sure. Without him, it's not just our district that benefited, but it was the entire state that benefited. So I think that everyone owes you a debt of gratitude for all of your effort in that regard.
Unprecedented. I don't think we've ever had clapping like that before. I'm not sure.
The team that works closest to me knows all those days I was in Denver, they were covering for me here. So thanks for their support as well. So thank you.
Thank you. Other comments, questions? No? Okay. Well, then, thank you, Bill. Thank you, Bruce and Leslie.
And we'll bring this back at our next scheduled time. So thank you. And again, we do
So
not.
what is the next time
Bill, do you
for
want to
this?
comment on our timeline?
Right, so the next scheduled time would be the preliminary, or the proposed budget. I'm bringing that forward at the last meeting in May.
Okay.
So that's the full budget document for the proposed
Okay.
budget.
And so at that point, we'll know exactly where we are financially. I mean, we'll have be much more clear
Yes.
from the state. Okay. All right.
I might just, so, yes, see, the Colorado Department of Education, I mean, I guess maybe to give us some, I mean, they've already conducted the runs, the budget runs on these assumptions around 1292, so that's what we build this off of. So, you know, so we'll keep monitoring those as they might make adjustments, but that's their process as they push out to every school district based on projected enrollment and funding sources, what we can anticipate in each of these funding categories. And that's what we build this off of. So, anyway, but yes, later in May, we'll be back. Thanks.
Okay.
Thanks, Bill.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Okay, the next item on our agenda is agenda setting for upcoming meetings. I have one for exec session. It's, we'll need to set some time in an upcoming exec session for evaluation. This is our time for the annual review and discussion with the board. So we'll set that for sometime in May to get that going and talk about what process we'll follow. So that's one upcoming thing that's not exactly on our agenda right yet. We'll talk about process and so on. Okay. Anyone else have items that they would like to discuss or bring up? Seeing no comments, then the board will adjourn. We are going to break up, take about a 5-minute break, I think, to reset the room here for our work session on early childhood education. So this part of the meeting is adjourned, and we'll move some chairs around and
Move some tables and chairs.
and reconvene. So thank you very much. Meeting's adjourned.